October 1973. Gas stations across the United States ran dry almost overnight. Families sat in lines for 4, 5, 6 hours just to fill up their tanks. The Dow Jones collapsed. Inflation exploded. The most powerful economy on Earth was brought to its knees, not by bombs, not by missiles, not by any army, but by a pipeline. This is the story of the most devastating economic weapon ever deployed against America. A weapon that reshaped global power, redrew alliances, and changed the rules of the world economy forever. And almost nobody saw it coming. To understand why OPEC almost destroyed America in 1973, you have to understand a world that no longer exists. A world where America was king, where the dollar was God, where oil was cheap, plentiful, and taken completely for granted. That world ended in October 1973, and the man who ended it wasn't a general, or a president, or a nuclear scientist. He was a king. After World War II, America didn't just win a war, it won an era. The United States produced more than half of the world's manufactured goods. The dollar replaced gold as the world's reserve currency. American companies drilled oil from Texas to Saudi Arabia and sold it cheap. In 1950, gasoline in the United States cost about 27 cents a gallon. The average American family owned 2 cars. Nobody, and I mean nobody, thought twice about energy. Why would they? Oil was everywhere. It was cheap. Most of it came from friendly countries. But quietly, beneath the surface, a power shift was building. The Middle East was sitting on something extraordinary. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Kuwait, Libya, the UAE. Together, they held more than 60% of the world's proven oil reserves. And for decades, they had been selling it at prices dictated not by themselves, but by Western oil companies. 7 companies, later nicknamed the Seven Sisters, dominated global oil: Standard Oil of New Jersey, Royal Dutch Shell, British Petroleum, Chevron, Texaco, Gulf Oil, Mobil. These were Western corporations operating on Arab land, extracting Arab oil and keeping the profits largely for themselves. The Arab world was watching, and it was angry. In 1960, 5 nations, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Kuwait, and Venezuela, formed a new organization in Baghdad. They called it OPEC, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. At first, the West wasn't worried. OPEC was seen as a talking club, a gathering of smaller nations venting frustration. They were dangerously wrong. To understand 1973, you have to go back to 1967. In June of that year, Israel launched a preemptive strike against Egypt, Jordan, and Syria in what became known as the Six-Day War. Israel won decisively. In less than a week, it had captured the Sinai Peninsula, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and the Golan Heights. For the Arab world, it was a humiliation on a scale that is almost impossible to overstate. And the United States? America had backed Israel, diplomatically, militarily, financially. A slow, burning rage set in across the Arab world. Leaders began to ask a question that would change history. We are sitting on the world's largest oil reserves. The West needs our oil to survive. So why do we have no power? That question had a champion. His name was King Faisal of Saudi Arabia. Quiet, deeply religious, and razor-sharp in his political thinking, Faisal was not a man who made threats lightly. But in 1973, he was ready to follow through on one. In April 1973, Faisal met with executives from Aramco, the Arabian-American oil company, and delivered a message for Washington. He said that America must stop its support for Israel, or Saudi Arabia would use oil as a weapon. The warning was relayed to Washington. The Nixon administration largely ignored it. That was mistake number 1. October 6, 1973. It was Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish calendar. Israeli soldiers were fasting. Military posts were at minimum staffing. At exactly 2 p.m., Egypt and Syria launched a coordinated surprise attack on Israel from 2 fronts simultaneously. The Egyptian army crossed the Suez Canal. Syrian tanks flooded into the Golan Heights. Israel, caught completely off guard, it was in serious danger of being overrun for the first time in its existence. In Washington, President Richard Nixon, already consumed by the growing Watergate scandal, faced a crisis. His national security advisor, Henry Kissinger, made the call. America would launch a massive military airlift to resupply Israel, Operation Nickel Grass. Within days, American C-5 Galaxy transport planes were flying weapons, ammunition, and supplies directly to Israeli forces. It was the move that saved Israel. It was also the move that detonated the bomb. On October 17, 1973, OPEC's Arab members, meeting in Kuwait City, made a decision that would shake the foundations of the global economy. They announced an immediate oil embargo against the United States, and not just the U.S., any country that supported Israel in the Yom Kippur War. The Netherlands, Portugal, Denmark, South Africa, all cut off. And at the same time, they announced they would reduce oil production by 5% every month until Israel withdrew from Arab territories. The oil weapon had been fired. The effect on America was almost instantaneous. Within weeks, oil prices went from $3 a barrel to nearly $12 a barrel, a 400% increase in a matter of months. Gasoline prices at the pump roughly doubled. And then came the shortages. Gas stations ran dry. States introduced odd-even rationing. If your license plate ended in an odd number, you could only buy gas on odd-numbered days. If it ended in even, you bought on even days. People sat in lines for 2, 3, sometimes 6 hours. Fistfights broke out at gas stations. Some stations simply closed and never reopened. Nixon went on national television and asked Americans to turn down their thermostats, drive slower, and use less electricity. The federal government imposed a national speed limit of 55 miles per hour to conserve fuel. Airlines cut flights, factories reduced production, schools shortened their hours. For the first time in a generation, Americans felt something completely foreign to them: vulnerability. But the pain wasn't just at the gas pump, it was everywhere. Because in a modern economy, oil is in everything. It's in the trucks that deliver food to your grocery store. It's in the planes that carry business executives. It's in the fertilizer that grows crops. It's in the plastic wrapping on every product you buy. When oil prices quadruple, prices go up everywhere all at once. What happened next had a name: stagflation. Inflation shot up, unemployment rose, economic growth collapsed. The two things weren't supposed to happen at the same time. Every economist's textbook said so, but they did. The 1973 oil embargo didn't just create an energy crisis. It triggered the worst economic decade America had seen since the Great Depression. But the damage went far beyond economics. The oil embargo shattered something even more fundamental: the myth of American invincibility. For 3 decades, America had projected an image of limitless power. The world's policeman, the arsenal of democracy, the economy that could outproduce, outspend, and outlast any rival. And in the span of a few weeks, that image cracked. America's allies in Western Europe and Japan were hit even harder than the U.S. itself. They imported nearly 80 to 90% of their oil from the Middle East. They had almost no strategic reserves. Countries like Japan saw their entire post-war economic miracle threatened overnight. And what did this mean geopolitically? It meant that every U.S. ally started asking a terrifying question: can we really rely on America to protect our energy supply? Or do we need to make our own deals with the Arab world? France began cozying up to Arab states. Japan started negotiating directly with OPEC. The Western alliance showed fractures it hadn't shown since World War II. And watching all of this with quiet satisfaction from Moscow was Leonid Brezhnev and the Soviet leadership. The USSR was itself a major oil producer, and unlike the West, was completely immune to the embargo. While America scrambled, the Soviets reaped a windfall. Rising oil prices filled their treasury. Their influence in the Middle East deepened. The Cold War had just gotten a powerful new front: energy. Henry Kissinger flew between capitals in a frantic effort to broker a ceasefire between Israel and its Arab neighbors. His so-called shuttle diplomacy became legendary, flying from Cairo to Tel Aviv to Riyadh and back, trying to negotiate a deal that would end both the war and the embargo. It was a masterclass in real-world geopolitical maneuvering, and eventually it worked, sort of. A ceasefire was reached in November 1973. The embargo officially ended in March 1974, but the world it ended in looked nothing like the world it had started in. The 1973 oil embargo didn't just cause a crisis. It fundamentally rewired how America, and the entire world, thought about energy, economics, and national security. In 1975, the U.S. government created the largest emergency oil stockpile in the world: underground salt caverns in Louisiana and Texas, capable of holding more than 700 million barrels of oil, a buffer against any future embargo. Before 1973, the United States had no cabinet-level agency dedicated to energy policy. The crisis changed that. In 1977, President Jimmy Carter established the Department of Energy, recognizing for the first time that energy was a matter of national security. The 1973 shock was also the beginning of the end for America's love affair with gas-guzzling cars. Congress passed the Corporate Average Fuel Economy Standards in 1975, forcing automakers to build more efficient vehicles. Japanese automakers, already producing smaller, more fuel-efficient cars, flooded into the American market: Honda, Toyota, Datsun. They arrived just in time. American consumers, burned by high gas prices, started buying them by the millions. Detroit never fully recovered. But perhaps the most consequential and least understood legacy of 1973 was something called the Petrodollar system. Here's how it worked. After the embargo ended, Henry Kissinger negotiated a secret deal with Saudi Arabia. The Saudis would price all of their oil sales exclusively in US dollars. In return, the United States would provide Saudi Arabia with military protection and security guarantees. Other OPEC nations followed. Overnight, the US dollar became the only currency you needed to buy oil anywhere in the world, which meant that every country on earth needed to hold dollars in order to keep their economies running. It was a stroke of financial genius. America had turned a vulnerability into a structural global advantage. The petrodollar system effectively made the US dollar the permanent global reserve currency. It gave the Federal Reserve extraordinary power over the global economy. It meant that America could run deficits other countries simply could not, because there would always be global demand for dollars. That system still shapes the world today. 50 years later, the lessons of 1973 are still being written. The shale oil revolution of the 2000s, driven by American ingenuity and new drilling technology called hydraulic fracturing, or fracking, transformed the United States from a major oil importer into the world's largest oil producer. For the first time since the 1970s, America achieved something that once seemed impossible: energy independence. But the world has moved on. Today, the geopolitical battle is no longer simply about oil. It's about lithium, cobalt, rare earth minerals, the raw materials of the green energy transition. China controls much of the world's rare earth mining. The Democratic Republic of Congo holds more than 70% of the world's cobalt reserves. As the world shifts toward electric vehicles and renewable energy, a new version of the 1973 question is already forming. Who controls the resources that power the future, and who gets shut out? China has spent the last 2 decades doing exactly what the Arab states did in the 1960s, quietly acquiring resource assets around the world, positioning itself to hold strategic leverage over the clean energy economy. The playbook is identical to OPEC's. Control the resource, control the price, control the power. America is watching. And if history is any guide, it is once again dangerously slow to react. In October 1973, a group of Arab oil ministers in Kuwait City made a decision that nearly brought the most powerful economy in human history to a standstill, not with tanks, not with missiles, with a pipeline valve. They taught the world a lesson that should never have needed teaching. Energy is power, resource control is geopolitical leverage, and economic dependency is a vulnerability that no army can protect you from. America survived 1973. It adapted. It built reserves, changed its cars, rewired its financial system, and eventually found oil within its own borders. But the deeper question, the one that 1973 first forced the world to ask, has never gone away. Who controls what the world runs on? Because whoever holds that answer holds the world. If you found this video fascinating, make sure you subscribe, because we cover the hidden economic and geopolitical forces that shape our world every single week. And if you want to go deeper on the petrodollar system and how it shapes global finance today, that video is coming next. You don't want to miss it.